Welcome to the Halal Gap, presented by the Mosquers Film Festival, an open discussion with creative individuals highlighting the wealth of talent and diverse voices of Muslims from around the world. I'm your host, Sophia Alani, and this week, Mosquers Film Festival chair Sikandar Atiq visited New York to chat with two-time host of the Mosquers and star of his own Hulu original show, Ramy Youssef. The show follows Ramy, son of Egyptian immigrants, on a spiritually conflicting journey in his New Jersey neighborhood, pulled between his Muslim community that thinks life is a constant test, his millennial friends who think life is full of endless possibilities, and a God who's always watching. You can catch the first season of Ramy on Hulu in the US and on iTunes in Canada. Sikandar and Ramy sat down to discuss Ramy's new show, his story, and what it's like to be a Muslim in the TV industry.
My name is Sikandar Atiq. Thank you guys for joining us. Today we are really pleased to have joining us stand-up comedian, actor, writer, and the only two-time host of the Mosquers ever, Mr. Ramy Youssef. Ramy, how you doing, man?
Ramy.
Yeah.
Ramy. Come on, man. I hosted the Mosquers twice.
I said Ramy. What did I say?
You said Ramy.
I'm sorry, bro.
Dude, I hosted the Mosquers twice, bro.
Ramy.
Dude.
Did you see the Hassan thing about how to pronounce your name?
No, what is it?
Oh, my God. You should watch it. He did like an entire 10-minute diatribe on Ellen about how to pronounce brown names.
That's so
And then here I am
funny.
messing up your name.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's, yeah, people, what did he say? What is he like?
He's like Hassan. And then she
Hassan.
was like Hassan Minaj. He's like, no, it's Hassan.
Well, see, then Arabs want Hassan.
So he's saying it wrong.
He's saying it his way, you know? Like my
And
grandfather.
like how I said my way.
You
with
said it your
Ramy.
way. Yeah, that's exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Good stuff. So thank you again for joining us, man. I really appreciate this, especially considering I know how busy you are.
No, of course, man.
So really, we just wanted to start at the beginning. Obviously, stand-up comedy has been your career for the last little while. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into that, how you chose it as a career, and what the initial kind of reaction was to that?
Yeah, it started actually with sketch comedy. So I was doing, I was making things. I mean, I had always had a camera when I was a kid, and so I would put things together and shoot stuff and all that. And then it became acting and sketches that I did with my buddies, Jonathan and Kyle, growing up. And then I moved to LA to act.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was out there, I started to really dig into stand-up. It just became something that was really exciting to me.
Were they on YouTube?
Yeah, we started making YouTube things, and then we did.
Are they still on YouTube?
Some of them are.
What was the name of your sketch
Some
comedy?
of them were. You have to find it yourself.
Oh.
Yeah, you're gonna have to
Scavenger
rogue look. But so we started doing that stuff, but then it was really moving to LA. I got excited about doing stand up, and I was acting, and then I, you realize how unreliable acting and auditions can be, and you kind of want to write for yourself, and you want to express yourself that way. And so instead of waiting for budgets to shoot scripts, it became really exciting to get on stage and talk about things.
Nice, man. But did you face, obviously you did, but can you talk a little bit about some of the specific challenges that you faced trying to get your career started, especially, being from a minority group, both from an Arab perspective, but also from a Muslim perspective, trying to get that career launched, in a climate that might not have been as receptive to what it might be today, with a lot more pioneers in the industry, including yourself.
Yeah, there's an openness now. It probably was starting to open up when I kind of stepped into it. I think the biggest hurdles are very internal too. I think that there's not a lot of beacons, especially at the time, of people who are Muslim or people who are Arab who are making it by being their authentic selves. And so I think starting out, you kind of feel a bit like there isn't a path to do it. Even my parents, I always this was one of the first stand-up jokes I wrote, but with my mom, she found out I was I got cast in a show, and she was like, that's amazing. You're going to meet all these actors. You could become a lawyer for actors.
Yeah.
That was the mindset, It's very much, we gotta make sure that we're making money. And so much of that is, comes from the immigrant mindset, where we don't have really the luxury of figuring out our artistic voice.
Right.
We're not, we're especially in newer communities in this country. A lot of us aren't sitting on banks of wealth or generational wealth in this country.
Totally.
I certainly don't come from that.
Yeah.
And so there's this push and pull, because you want to have the artistic desire, but you also, want to feel secure, and you want to
Right.
feel, and so much of the immigrant experience is wanting security and,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
wanting to feel established. And so to go into something like art
Mhm.
is art is the opposite of security.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
about exploring your insecurities. It's about, entering a space for yourself that isn't as charted. And so those things get in the way. And then when you don't see people who look like you doing it, you don't feel like you can at times. And so there's a little bit of stuff from the industry, but
Mhm.
a lot of it is really, realizing that path is there for you,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you can
yeah.
take it.
So with that in mind, I mean, how did your family take it? I mean, you talk a lot about the struggles of, not the struggles, but more so the challenges and the amount of hustle, I guess, for lack of a better word, that your family, or specifically your father, that you talk about in your stand up, had to really overcome to get to the position of being able to provide for you guys in the manner he was. How did he take it that you were willing to take that risk and go into a career path that might not have been as comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, both my parents are just very, as you said, really gave up a lot and
Right.
worked hard. And I think that's something that we think about a lot as kids of those kinds of parents. There's
Yeah.
that built-in guilt, and you want to, live up to it, and you want to do that. And so with both my parents, I think they took it about as well as you could.
Yeah.
I think that they, I think that they were, they're very open-minded people. I
Right
mean,
on.
I think we obviously had discussions about it, but my dad has always been someone who's kind of presented the options to me and been really clear about what he thinks is right, and then also really clear about how that might not be the way that I go.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so it was it was as constructive as it could be.
Nice.
Yeah,
Awesome.
which was pretty amazing.
No, that's great to hear, man. So, going beyond that a little bit, your comedy and even your show, which we'll get into a little bit later, your comedy specifically, though, in a lot of cases tries to push boundaries, regarding religion or, the community, whether that's the Arab community or the broader community, quite a bit. So, how do you find that balance between what is funny and what might be considered offensive? Um, or do you even consider that, or are you simply portraying thoughts and allowing people to interpret them how they will?
Yeah, no, I think about it a lot, actually. I really, have some baseline rules,
Yeah.
which is I don't ever want to make fun of the religion. I don't want to make fun of God.
Mm.
I don't want to go at it, attack it. Um, any of my questioning or any of my thoughts about that, about religion, I keep those private. Those are things to myself, because
Mhm.
I'm a believer, and I think believers are supposed to have questions, and
Yeah.
this is a part of our faith. But none of that really needs to be put out on display by me,
Right.
because I'm not, in a position where I need to add to the chorus of people
Right.
going and shooting that down. And it's also something I believe in, and that's a part of my life. And so what I'm more interested in doing is examining where I fit in, and how I'm acting. I
Yeah,
look
yeah.
at what I believe, and then I look at what I actually do. And so the comedy is about the space between those things and the hypocrisies between those things.
Right.
So by definition, what I'm talking about is wrong, but I'm saying it is. I'm not. It's not a promotion. It's an examination. And
Mm.
so really, it's using the comedy to kind of put that on display, and be, introspective, and kind of say, okay, well, um what am I bringing to this, and how am I acting? And then maybe people kind of can look at that and say, okay, well, I've made some of those mistakes too.
Yeah.
And you can kind of, find the connection in that, and try to push past those things.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I think what's great about comedy is it allows you to go places that other spaces can't. So it allows you to be wrong, but you have to be, you know, truthful and honest about where you're coming from. So it might be factually incorrect.
Yeah.
But as long as it has like emotional truth, and as
Yeah.
long as it feels like a real honest experience, and that's not to say all jokes are true, but it's more to say that the core of the feelings are true. So
Right.
so when you're correct about feelings, that's different than being correct about facts. And
Right.
the reason why I am drawn to being Muslim, and the reason why I am and why I'm religious, is because I don't live my life according to my feelings.
Mhm.
You know, I live my life according to my faith,
Right.
and I strive to
Right,
live
right,
my
right.
life
Yeah.
according to my faith. And then in my comedy, I explore the feelings that kind of come
Yeah.
under that umbrella.
Yeah.
And so it's a space that is not instructional. And so I think in terms of talking about how you approach it with looking at the faith and looking at the community, those are my rules. My
Yeah.
rules are, I'm not going to go against the faith. I'm really actually, if anything, going against myself.
No, that's makes total sense.
Yeah.
So one of the the big themes around your comedy and even with the show is about being a young Muslim that's living and was raised in America, and obviously our team in Canada feels very much the same way. So kind of the entire Western world, if you will. So how much of that is a personal reflection? How much of that conflict between trying to hold on to your faith while also living in the world that we do is an accurate representation of your upbringing and your current life, as you will?
Well, I mean, in talking about the show, but
Yeah.
also I guess talking about my stand up as an extension, I, you know, like we were talking about the way I spoke with my family,
Yeah.
when I decided I wanted to get into this.
Right.
I have a very communicative family, you
Yeah.
know, and so that's not always the case. But also the reason my family is so communicative is because they've kind of like worked through certain things to get to that place, you
Yeah.
know, and so I think a lot of times there is not as much intimacy as we'd want within our families and within our communities, and so I kind of stand up and write the show from a place where it's a little less intimate. Maybe it feels a little more like other dynamics within the community,
Mm.
and so I write from kind of like an slightly alternate reality version of my life,
Yeah.
and so looking at those things and seeing it from that vantage point is important. But the actual struggle between faith and desire, those are all really real to me. Those
Right.
are all questions that keep me up. Those are all things that I will debate endlessly, and kind of interrogate myself on endlessly.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's the hope in making it public, is again not to promote that behavior, but to hopefully create a link that we live in this culture right now, especially kind of where we're at. Let's say as Muslims, we're very prudish in certain ways. We're very conservative. This is historically kind of one of our most conservative eras in how we view things. And I think people feel very much like you have to be fully in playing a perfect score or go, or leave,
Yeah.
or get out.
Do you feel like that's a unique challenge, or I guess not so much challenge, but more of a standpoint of kind of first generation or second generation immigrants to the West? Like I can speak from a perspective of like a Pakistani/Indian immigrant. You go back to Pakistan, people are oftentimes a lot more liberal than they are here. Is that, do you think there's some sort of a reflection of, hey, I got to hold on to, protect, and really cultivate my quote unquote traditional values living in North America, and that therefore then creates like an almost additionally conservative atmosphere? Or, what are your kind of general thoughts on that?
It might a little bit. I mean, I think if you're in the West, structurally, you don't hear the call to prayer.
Right.
So there's
Yeah.
there's going to be this this panic.
Yeah.
And it's a legitimate one, it's a legitimate concern. I want to hold on to this. We need to preserve this. I think that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the conservativeness and the prudishness is kind of, wide scale.
Yeah.
It's just we're in a conservative moment.
Mm.
And there's a lot of reasons why that is.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, us with the Mosquers, for example, our intention has never been to try to showcase any sort of particular viewpoint, whether that's conservative or liberal or otherwise. I think more than anything, it's a matter of, being a platform and allowing different voices to come to the table and and portray whatever it is that what they want to share through the medium of art, right? And so, I think there is a very interesting opportunity, whether, one would consider themselves more on the conservative or liberal spectrum, to use art as a voice, right? And, going now to your show, for example, with Ramy. First of all, congratulations.
Thanks, man.
Amazing show. Can you tell us a little bit about how hard or maybe how easy it was to get that show off the ground, and then, why you felt it was necessary to do it out on your own, like rather than take another role on a potential sitcom and, do that way? What made you willing to take the risk, put your name on it, and go forward with it?
Someone had to, right?
Amen. Amen, man.
I mean, man, it's on, I think part of the challenge is getting it off the ground. It's hard to talk about God in Hollywood.
Yeah.
There's not really a lot of sincerity around it.
Mm.
And I don't even blame that. I do think that the industry and culture of religion has been worthy of a lot of what comes its way. But I think for those who feel and understand the reality of faith and who have genuine, connection to it, and it's genuinely part of their life, that you want to talk about that, and you want to figure out how can we talk about that. And we're in a place where it's like church or go to mosque or pray it's almost like a punchline,
right?
It's like a joke, that's like an end to a joke. And then I took her to church. It's farcical that anyone would want to do that or go there. And so this is kind of the landscape that you enter. And then so I'm in this landscape and I want to make something complicated. I think there is an opportunity to make a show about this type of family. And there's so many things that you can do with it. And there's this burden and weight put on a project like this to represent and to represent everyone and to represent Muslims and to make us look good. And I made a couple of decisions to really make us look human more than look good. I did not want to make a commercial. I wanted to make something that was raw. I wanted to make something that, would get to where we're at. And I didn't arrive there easily. I mean, it was hard. I kind of lost a lot of sleep over wanting to do this. It was very, tough to reconcile that, okay, this is a community I care about, and I know there's going to be a lot of things that I show here that are going to bother them.
Right.
But if this can open up conversation, then we get to a good place. Because I didn't want to make something where I was just kind of performing as like a cultural mascot.
Right. Right.
And I also didn't want to make something that felt too right.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want it to feel instructional to anybody.
Yeah.
Because that's the bad side of making something that feels too sanitary and too clean.
Yeah.
It becomes misleading.
Totally.
Because people kind of start to think, oh wait, this is how I should live.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I do think people watch my show and it's very clear that that's not how you should live. And I prefer that. I prefer to be clearly wrong than ambiguously correct.
Right.
Because I think that's way more dangerous. And so to put my name on it and to tell the story this way was very reflective of kind of arriving at a place where I, wanted to kind of say we're not showing any experience other than the character Ramy. This is the only thing we're claiming to show. This doesn't speak for all Muslims. This barely gets into what it's like to be a Muslim woman. It's limited. It's very limited, and tonally it's very focused. And these were a lot of decisions that we made that I think make it more entertaining to watch. But what it does do admittedly on some things, it just leaves a lot of things out. And that's kind of the nature of a first season, 10 episodes. I think what we do very thoroughly. And then there's a lot of things we just haven't covered yet. But I would rather not cover things than kind of check a box just to say that we did.
Yeah, totally. So, let's dive into that a little bit. I mean, I think being one of the first to do a show that has an unabashedly Muslim character, but also struggling with everyday struggles of being, Muslim in this environment, is going to create a situation whereby people see you, even though you claim, quite clearly that, look, I don't want to be a poster boy for Muslims, but people will all, will still, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, see you as someone who is that kind of a pioneer. So tell me a little bit about the reaction that you've gotten from the show, both from maybe the Muslim community, the Arab community, like the general community. How has that been so far? And I know it's early, so
yeah, it's early, but it's also people watch things pretty quick and
Totally.
they kind of get it out, and so I would say, well, unanimously, people are engaged with the show.
Yeah,
So
no, for sure.
there is a level of engagement regardless of
Yeah.
where you fall and how you feel. People are talking about it. People are watching it. And there's discourse, which I think, to think that a comedy could do that is
Right.
really cool.
Absolutely.
The fact that I can't really remember the last time a comedy about this type of family was getting to do that. I think it's really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So within that, I would say wide scale, I really think people really like it, are really resonating with it, are having a good time with it. That feels like really cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Individually, Arab community, I think the Arab community is into it. I think, there's some people who have issues of things that were shown, or they feel like maybe it's not specifically their experience, but Arabs, Egyptians, the number of Palestinians that are like, I didn't think I'd see a Palestinian flag on on US TV. I can't believe it. I think Arabs, are connecting with it, and it's opening a lot of really cool conversations. Muslims, on a little bit of a wider scale.
Yeah.
Most Muslims in America are black. Under that, I believe, South Asian. I'm not sure if there's more Arabs or more South Asians, but we have,
it's a tight race.
It's a tight race, right? It's gotta be.
You're outnumbered 2-1 in this room, but
it's gotta be. I know this room, yeah. I think so I think the wider Muslim communities don't think this is their story on a level, which is okay, and that doesn't mean they don't like it. I think that probably it starts to get split. People like it, and the other half don't. You know. And then that discourse,
it's interesting you say that though, because for me, for example, and a lot of people that I know, when Master of None came out, for example, Aziz trying to tell his story from an Indian immigrant perspective, second generation immigrant, it was one of those things where it's like, oh my God, there's a brown guy on TV who's like killing it, right? And when I see your show, maybe it's because that's the component of my personality, that it's like, oh, it's a fellow Muslim on TV, right? Whereas if it's like an Arab American, maybe it's like, oh, it's a fellow Arab on TV. So it's interesting to me because for me, and I think a lot of people who are, South Asian or, Indonesian or all sorts of very non-Arab Muslim backgrounds in the West, they do kind of see it as like, oh, this is like a Muslim guy who's very unabashedly talking about his faith as a central kind of theme throughout his show. Whereas it's not just hey, I'm going to talk about my cultural background. Your faith very much shapes your entire background, right? Yeah. And you don't try to hide that at all. Yeah. So have you seen much backlash at all from the Muslim community because of this, and because of the fact that you aren't trying to hide your sins in any way, if you will,
Yeah, I struggle a lot with the hide your sins, because it's tough, because it's I think hide your sins, we need to understand kind of where it's coming at, and that's something that I'm understanding too. I don't have mastery on this. I am a comedian. And so I'm always looking to learn, and I think this is a conversation starter. I do think that as a community, we're just hiding way too much, within our various communities, to the point where we're not talking to each other. And again, there's this mentality of play a perfect score or leave. And then we don't talk to each other, and we can't be intimate with each other because we feel like we'll be so judged. It'll get back to our families. And so what ends up happening is people just leave the community. It kind of starts with, well, I can't date a girl from my community, but I do want to date, so let me just go out. And then you're kind of out for a while, and then you're like, I think maybe you're going to come back. And then you're like, you know what? Maybe this person just and little by little, and then we're not even our communities are dissolving,
Right.
because we're not talking about these things that pretty much everyone's thinking or doing or
Right.
talking about, but
Right.
we're avoiding the conversations.
Yeah.
And so it's hard because, the way that I have presented things in this show, the main blowback on this show with Muslims is the sex.
Yeah.
That's just number one, the main
Yeah.
blowback.
Yeah.
And it's because it's something we don't talk about.
Right.
If my character had a machete,
Yeah.
people would be like, yeah, but he prays. and it's interesting because it highlights what the viewer is uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
People who aren't Muslim who watch this show go, man, all this dude does is pray or talk about praying. People who are Muslims who watch this show go, man, all this dude does is have sex. and it's interesting because if you look at the explicit prayer scenes in the show
Right.
and explicit sex scenes in the show, there's more praying than there is sex. But the mind goes to the discomfort,
Right.
and the mind goes to the place and that's not to say that, look, it's a first season comedy and I worked as hard as I could on it. I'm very proud of it. Also, there are things that could be fixed. I mean, that's any TV show. And very rarely does a TV show come out as a first season comedy from a new comedian have the pressure of needing to be the Sopranos, of needing to be, on a Game of Thrones level.
Totally.
So the stakes are really high here when people talk about this. And I understand it and I respect it. And I don't, we have so little that I was looking forward to this type of thing. I get it.
Totally.
And I made something, so I don't want anyone to, I get to make something. So
Yeah.
by all means, that's the whole point of this medium, is there can be criticism. But to go back to what we were talking about how we're kind of at one of our most conservative states, if you look at Islamic poetry,
Right.
if you look at hadith, if you look back, I mean, there's this one poet, Omar ibn Rabi'a from Quraysh. I mean, these are formative poets. These are revered and part of Islamic history, and the Arabic in them is used in tandem with understanding the Quran and understanding hadith. And you look at what they're writing about. They're writing about sex. They're writing about adultery. I mean, this is the faith that has polygamy in it. This is a faith that in hadiths, there is a level of eroticism in discussing certain things. And so it's really interesting that we've gotten to a point to
Making
say,
Amaad sweat over here.
No, but it's
I'm looking for the problematic way.
no, it's interesting to say that we can't talk about these things.
No, for sure.
And it's not, and I think if you watch the show, we are not promoting, I don't think sexual freedom is freedom. I mean, I think one of the most sincere moments in the show is my character saying that he wishes he never had sex.
Right.
So we are looking at it from a lens where I don't believe we're saying, hey, I don't think there's one positive sexual experience. There's multiple positive experiences of prayer. And so to me, it's about, how do you show this battle of the nafs? How do you show this battle of desire? And what we have right now in this state that we're in is people coming at this conversation immediately shutting down the fact that any of this is being depicted. So we can't have a real conversation. And it's interesting because when you look at this shift and this inability to talk about sex within being Muslim, it's tied to puritanical values. It's looking at colonialism. It's looking at Christian influence on Islam makes Islam prudish. Pre-Christian influence, you look at the way they talked about Muslims and Arabs, and they're like, all these are the most sexual people that we've ever encountered. And now the way that Islam is being performed is in mimicry to Christian Puritanism. So it's fascinating because I've gotten this critique from people about the show being like, oh, you're just performing for white people. And I'm like, I think your faith, the way your faith is being performed is for white people. I mean, it's and again,
Great clap back.
No, but again, it's not, this isn't to promote these things.
Right.
I'm not saying this character is right. I have purposely created a character who is wrong. And that's television. You need to start somewhere so that you can grow somewhere. I mean, if someone tweeted something really funny, a sheikh had wrote, why does Ramy only have to deal with sex? And this sheikh, actually, he seems really cool. I mean, I was looking at his Twitter, I was like, he seems dope. But he wrote like, why does Ramy only have to struggle with sex? And he could struggle with something else. And someone tweeted back, yeah, he should wake up at Fajr and struggle between praying 8 or 20 rak'ahs. It made me laugh so much because I was like, I mean, yeah, I guess that's a storyline.
I mean, good luck getting that renewed. Yeah. No, jump. We're gonna bring a guest. We're gonna bring a guest interviewer in. Amaad, what you got?
Do you feel like people watch it and I kind of take the opposite approach, like, oh, this is kind of like what I do and he's okay with showing it, so I guess I should be okay like this too, and maybe I don't need to worry about how much, shit I feel guilty for because someone is out there comfortable enough to talk about it, but at the same time they might get complacent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm sure one or two people do that, but I would say overwhelmingly what this show shows is the remorse with those actions, and then it shows a character. It shows the remorse with those actions, and then it shows a character that is continuously going back to his faith and going back to pray. And so those people who maybe act like this Ramy character, in my mind, they already feel like they're on their way out. These are people who are leaving the community and leaving this being part of their life because there's no avenue to connect on it, and everyone around them is, looking at things like it must be a perfect score.
Yeah.
So I actually think this can make those people feel less lonely. I don't think that we do this in a way that justifies those things. I think if anything, it shows those people don't lose that fight.
Yeah.
Like, keep going. And I've heard it. I've gotten messages from people who are like, bro, I feel like fasting Ramadan for the first time in years.
Amazing.
You make me feel like I want to try and pray 5 times a day. I don't see anyone like there might be some people who take what you took from it, but those people were gonna no. It's a good question. It's and I think it's a question that's on everyone's mind. That's why I'm happy you asked it. But I just think that those people didn't need this show to do that. And they didn't need this show to continue doing that. Right. And I believe from my vantage point that this does more good than harm.
Yeah. No, I mean it's really interesting parallel because we started Mosquers 13 years ago, right? And over those 13 years, we've seen that same evolution occur. Where anytime we tried to push the boundaries of any real type of struggle that people face, we had the biggest backlash from the local community, being like, "How dare you guys show a movie that had a girl wearing a skirt in it?" You know, and then from there it became, "How dare you show a movie where there's a homosexual love story?" We showed that 2 years ago. Yeah, and it keeps going from there. But unless you're actually showcasing the real struggles of people, how can you ever truly showcase A, the diversity of the Muslim people, right? And B, how can you ever make this a religion where it's welcoming for everyone and understanding that everybody has their own struggles, their own challenges, and that it's not ever a situation where you're so far gone that, you might as well go find a different solution, right? Yeah. I mean, to your point, I think it's very important to have a platform, an avenue where people can see that there is that, that duality, if you will, between the internal struggle that people face, and that it's part of the journey. You know, it's part of the process of finding kind of betterment continually.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting too because it's a friend of mine called me and he's Pakistani, and he said to me, he said I didn't see this kind of backlash to Kumail. And he goes and he goes, the thing is, the reason why is because Kumail just says he's not Muslim.
Exactly.
And it's so interesting that people would prefer. There are people who just prefer me to say I am not Muslim. Right. And so how horrifying is that? That if you're a believing Muslim and your preference is that someone just not have the faith in their heart. Yeah. If they're not gonna portray or be perfect. Yeah.
It is like so antithetical. Like the version of perfect that you want, right? Yeah. Which is so skewed 99% of the time anyway.
That's the dialogue we're engaged in.
Right.
I'm not an idiot, man. I know what I knew what was gonna happen when I put this show out. Right. And I did it because the way that you guys have faced backlash at Mosquers, the way that art in our community is not allowed to progress because of the backlash that happens all the time. Yeah. I want that to be over. Right. So it would be, I don't care if like imams at Friday prayer reference Ramy from Ramy as what not to do. I would actually love that.
That'd be amazing.
Well, because then it would mean my show worked. Yeah. Because now there's all this stuff that no one could talk about.
Also, you should probably ask them why they watched it.
Yeah. Well, that's the funniest thing too, is when someone's like, this show is trash, no one should watch it. And then in episode 8, and I'm like, you made it to episode 8? I thought no one should watch this. I mean, it's amazing. But but if it can give people a reference point to talk about, even as something they don't like, that's okay. That opens up the convo, and that makes this dialogue that needs to happen start to happen. And again, like I said, I'm not saying my execution's perfect. I'm not saying any of that.
Yeah.
But I'm really happy with how people are talking, and I'm excited to grow the show and grow the characters and kind of and I think it's an exciting conversation, and I hope that it becomes something that helps other Muslim creators, because I don't want Muslim creators to see how some backlash has been happening to my show and then feel like, oh man, I better not make something because Twitter is going to explode. Here's the thing, Twitter's going to explode no matter what. It's the point of Twitter. Like nobody, you know what I mean? Like you look up a drug and you're like,
not often, but
no, like a medicine, right?
I got you.
You look up a medicine and you look online on the forums.
Yeah.
You don't find 400 people saying, man, this medicine worked. No, it worked. They're not going online.
Yeah, exactly.
They're living their life because the medicine worked. The forums is a bunch of people saying, no, this allergy pill made me lose my leg.
Right.
You know, it's a bunch of people who are in a place of discomfort and pain, and that's okay. And the internet is amazing for that. It's amazing for sharing those things.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want people to be concerned with that stuff. I don't want Muslim creators, someone who wants to submit something to Mosquers, someone who wants to pitch something on TV. I'm not saying you have to take my approach.
Right.
I'm saying you can be unabashed in however way you want to, but don't make things with how people are going to react or overreact in mind. That's not fair to you.
Yeah. Amaad, do you want to chime in again?
It's not a chime, it's a question. All right. So, and this might be like a spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it or whatever, but just curious. I know you're saying like, you know, don't pay attention to like what people will think when you're making stuff, kind of. Mm-hmm. But when you were like writing the show, what was like the one thing what was like the thing that you were most like, damn, should I put this in? Is this too far? Was there anything?
There was a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like
stuff. Back of the car scene for some people turns them off quick. I think the biggest one that I was kind of toying with and you know, because, you know, we have this character who in Ramy who, you know, he's dealing with his sexual desires and he's dealing with, you know, this conflict and you kind of want him to fall, you know, you need him to really mess up. And I think the one that we kind of had debated a lot in the writer's room was the storyline with Salma who he meets during Ramadan.
Yeah.
And kind of making that choice and going in that direction.
Right.
And that's one that has, you know, I think people have reacted to it in many ways that I thought they would. I think it, you know, it goes both ways. I think it serves the story well. Yeah. And I don't think that the point of it is to be by any means sacrilegious. I mean, it's tinged with remorse. I mean, it's like it's very, you know, it drives him to you know, to do things and go back to his homeland. You know, it kind of like takes him places, you know. So that was one. But every episode, man, is like, are we going to do that? Are we going to do that? And I think that that's a good feeling because, again, that's kind of the whole point of this. I think if you want to watch a khutbah, you should. And I think if you want to watch something that can maybe help you look at some emotions that you ignore or that you don't know how to process, then watch this. And this isn't going to give answers. It's just going to ask questions. And I think there's unity in feeling like, okay, so there's other people asking the same questions. Yeah. And I think that that's something that can open up the conversations that I think the show is opening up. I think that that's really fun. And so that's why taking all those risks becomes worth it.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, congratulations on getting picked up for season 2. You touched on it very briefly before, but are there ideas or topics that you feel like you really do want to flesh out in season 2 that you didn't you know, being 10 episodes, you just didn't get a chance to pick up on yet?
Oh, there's so much, man. Yeah, there's so much. I mean, there's so much to open up with the characters of my sister and mom.
Because that's been one of the biggest, you know, feedback points, if you will, that I've seen anyway, is that the portrayal of Muslim women specifically has been somewhat lacking from a empowerment perspective, if you will.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've thought about and are wanting to explore further, or?
Yeah, of course. And this is one where it's really interesting. A lot of Arab women who watch the show feel seen because they say, oh man, you're pointing out the double standard.
Right.
And then now we need to take a step past the double standard, right? So I think with the real estate we had in season 1, we showed the double standard.
Right.
And then, now I do want to step in and seeing more fleshed out and empowered characters, of course. But I think that some of the, feedback is, it's hard because, look, shows about women don't portray women as accurately as they could.
Yeah.
There is, we had a room full of, we had 4 really talented women who wrote for this show, 2 of them Muslim. And so we all, talked about a lot of these stories, and there's a certain real estate thing. But another thing is we really chose to look at characters with their problems. So I've seen the critique where people say, well, the women are only, defined by their sexuality or defined by those problems. And it's true, that is kind of where it's at right now in just the first 10. But if you look at Ramy, who's the main character, that's also kind of what we're talking about with him too. And so in a way, it was part of the thesis of this season and things that we were discussing is a lot of it was in relation to sex and sexuality. And I think that that's okay. I also think that there's room for nuance. So it's all good. Right. It's like heard, I hear you. And I think that they're really good points. There was an article in the Atlantic.
Yeah, that's one.
It was pretty good. Yeah. I was talking to the woman. I wrote the woman who wrote it. I was like, hey, you made some really good points. But awesome. The only thing I don't like about the article is that you didn't name any of the Muslim women we hired, and you named every other white name in the room because again, there's this kind of attempt to kind of be like, there's this attempt to kind of like put it in this thing of like this isn't for us, and it's like no, it is. It really is. I didn't make anything up. Right. This is a conversation that we can and should have. And I hear the feedback and it's not things that I didn't see. But you're making a show. I didn't binge my show until 2 weeks before it came out. Wow. Because you're putting it all together and you're working on one and then you go back work on another and this and that. I mean, there's so many aspects to this thing. Amazing. Again, like the critique's good. I like it. And it's also it's exciting because it gives us places to go. And so looking at those storylines and fleshing those out is of course it's a massive. I'm excited to do it. It's not a reaction to the critique. It's where the story logically will go.
That's awesome.
Is that the story is going to mature and the characters are going to mature and we're going to step into, we don't have to explain who people are in a second season. And so it's going to be really fun to just kind of dive right in.
Oh, that's perfect. Awesome. Well, how can people in Canada watch this? Because unfortunately it's been a hard task. Is there any news on that front?
We're working with an international distributor, so
Perfect.
I'm hoping that that's solved in the next couple months.
Good to know.
To get it out there. I know people are finding their ways to do it. Otherwise,
DM me separately.
Do what you got to do, but know that you can watch it in legal HD very soon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. We also like to wrap up our interviews with a couple of just, random questions. Do you have a favorite movie or a movie that you think is so underrated that people need to get on it ASAP?
You know what movie people don't talk about enough and I really love is Children of Men is so good.
Oh, yeah. Good.
I feel like no one talks about that movie. Yeah, Clive Owen. Yeah. I'm like, where's Clive Owen? No one talks about Clive Owen.
That's a good question. Where is Clive Owen?
I think he was doing that show, The Nick or something. I don't know. But he man, that movie's great. And Julianne Moore is so good in it. And when what happens to her happens, I'm very shocked and all that. I mean, that movie stands the test of time too. I rewatched it recently. Even like the technology in it still looks, so good. But the technology still looks like it. And that movie was made 10 years ago. Yeah, easily. And the tech in it still feels ahead of now, which never happens. It's really cool.
Yes,
it's a rewatch.
Yeah, definitely a rewatch. Awesome. Well, Ramy, Ramy. Now you got me tripping out. All right. Thank you for joining us, man. Dude. Really appreciate it. Your HBO special as well is coming out this summer, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, coming out this summer. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, we all are looking forward to seeing that. Continued success to you, my man.
Thanks, man.
And congratulations again on season 2.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of The Halal Gap. A special thank you to Sikandar Atiq for hosting this week's episode, Amaad Bhatti for helping us produce this episode, and to Ramy Youssef for sitting down with us to discuss his journey as a Muslim in the entertainment industry. Don't forget to check out his hit new show, Ramy, on Hulu in the US and iTunes in Canada. And be sure to check out Mosquers Film Festival on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to stay up to date on brand new episodes of The Halal Gap and to see what else we're up to at the Mosquers. Once again, my name is Sophia. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you all for joining us as we aim to close the gap.